fuck up. It's time to talk business. Jared Taylor, Matt Best, and Evan Hafer proudly present Blackhearted. Sponsored by BlackRifle Coffee Company and Arson Wave.
Amnesty International sticker.
Yeah,
Everybody, we're here to help. I'm Amnesty International.
I put I heart my airman stickers on the commander's vehicle.
So yeah, but then you were talking about the 50 cal. So we got issued.
Yeah.
Like vehicle mobility was brand new. So we got 50 cals that we were mounting up on top, and looked at it and it was like, well, how do you sight this thing in? How do you zero it? And they're like, oh, you have tracers. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, we have lasers. Why would I use tracers if I have lasers? So we carved this out of a block of aluminum. There were some guys that were running vertical mills. We sketched it out. It was me, Evan, and Todd, and just kind of worked over it and kind of figured out the spacing and stuff. And then
for what, to put a laser in the chamber to sight it in?
Well,
or?
actually, so you can. So it's a rail mount that goes over the top of the.
Oh, you're talking about an actual. Okay.
It was an actual rail mount. So you'd open up the feed tray cover, you drop it down, slide it back, and then it would just hand tighten with bolts, and then you could close it. And then it had 3 rails on the top and 2 rails on the side, so that you could run an EOTech or a laser or stuff on the side, or multiple lasers or a light or something like that. And so we took those, and actually, like when some of the first guys saw, I mean, they're all over the place now. I mean, there's a couple of companies that have straight up stolen my design, but that's all right. But we put that on there, and at first guys were like, "What do you need that for? It's a area weapon." And it was like, "Yeah, but I don't want it to be an area weapon because can only carry so much ammo." And then when we actually used it on targets, it was unbelievably effective.
That laser just.
Yeah, I mean, you put the laser on their position and you hammer in about 3 or 4 50 cal rounds.
Yeah.
Whew.
No one wants to play with a 50.
Nobody wants to play with a 50.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was nice. I mean, like I said, they're all over the place now, though.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, guys would always look at those things, and like, the people that are inventing and innovating, sometimes they're ostracized by their subcultures. So I've seen it with Jeff. Not that he's been ostracized by any stretch of the imagination, but everybody be like, God, Jeff's an odd, scary cat, and so he'd be turning wrenches on stuff, and it's like, wow, what is that? Come back and you go, oh, well, that's fucking really useful. Holy shit. And honestly, there's been a few years there where he's been ahead of the curve. Like, he was, when I first walked into his house, I think in 2001, he had a kettlebell on the floor, and I had no idea what the hell that was. Like, I was like, what is that thing? He's like, no, dude, there's this guy, was it Pavel? Yeah, Pavel, this Russian kettlebell guy, and he's like showing me this, dude. I'm like, this is crazy. What is this thing that you're talking about? Like,
dumbbells
go
are for.
to the
Who's
gym
ever gonna buy
and work out.
Yeah.
Just stop being a psycho. And he had a
insert
huge,
CrossFit.
Yeah, seriously, yeah. And then it was like he had this big exercise ball, and he was like standing on it and doing kettlebell stuff. And you're going, this is all super insane to me. One, you're going to break your neck, and then 2, like, dude, what are you doing flipping this thing around? There's no way that can help you.
Where Evan
Turkish
and I
get-ups
got together so well, though, is because Evan was one of those few people that I could explain my rationale to, and he
listens. Yeah,
I got it. Oh yeah, that makes sense. So like standing on a stability ball and working out, where if you look at, and this runs down the rabbit hole of like Jeff's theory on strength, but strength is nothing more than dynamic balance. So you have to have balance before you can do anything. You've got to build those core of those muscles, those stability muscles. So my theory in life is, before you increase your weight, you decrease your stability, and then when you develop there, then you increase your weight, because that's when I was big into I was doing amateur fighting and stuff, and so it was like, okay, how do I get stronger in weird positions? And all of it's based off of
it's
balance.
Efficiency of muscle too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So
it's just like those Power athletes guys talk about mobility. Being an athlete is being able to be agile.
Well, and there's also like a lot of studies in that, like exertion of strength in awkward positions, because you're so used to like a squat, but if you change what your stability is in different like formats of where you're putting your body and try to explode on that strength, you'll have relatively zero strength.
Yeah. Because your brain will shut down the neural impulses that reach out, because you're only as strong as the chain itself. And so wherever that weak link is, then the brain will try to protect it, the body, especially
overcompensates
the central nervous. Yeah. And it will say, nope, we're not doing that because you're going to cause damage. And then that's where, like, when you're doing something dumb and you're picking up your shoe from the floor and you're like, my back, that's a classic example of now you have that weak link in the chain and you caught it just right. So anyways, that's what with the kettlebell, with the exercises that I was doing was a lot of bell up, because I'm a big believer in forearm strength based off sympathetic response.
You did that to me. I walked back to Ready Man to get my little second workout in, and you're like, gave me the sledgehammer and was showing me the special ways of curls, of full extension of the bicep and rotation. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So you can get a great workout, and it's not a lot of weight that you need, but it's motion. So.
The funny thing is, so, and going back into, there is a reason that we're talking about this, in innovation, not only innovation, but just the necessity involved in being able to say, okay, this is directly applicable to what I have going on. So strength can literally be defined by how you're applying it, meaning like 100%. You could have some badass biceps, but if you can't do what you want to do physically, it's irrelevant strength. So we have to define it based on what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're trying to punch somebody in the face,
functional application of
exactly.
strength.
And I think that's at the basis or the foundation of when you start thinking about innovation or inventing. It's not just inventing a new widget, but it's all aspects of your life where you're constantly seeking seeking improvement.
Yep.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, how do I get there? Do I get there based off of the same thing that everybody else is doing, or can I take that and tweak it?
That's like the same thing with tactics and all that, which I have, I find a lot of discrepancies in what's taught, is because there's like, it depends on the environment that you're in. Like, does your arm on your Glock with your fucking tricked out shit? Yeah, it works. It's great when you're sitting in a range, but what environment are you going to apply that firearm in, and how is that going to work? And then most people don't have answers to that questions. Or how are you going to shoot? Are you going to press out? Are you relaxed? There's different positions that I use in all different environments, and it's kind of looking at everything before you.
Foundation, you've got that good foundation. It was like one of the reasons why I got along with the Afghans and the Iraqis so well, is because they do stuff a little bit different, and it was like, okay, but the foundation is, 5 principles of patrolling. Common sense, I think, is the most important one that's in there. And it's like, okay, are you guys violating security? Does this make sense? Well, okay, great. Is it working? Okay, well, it's not exactly the way that I would do it, but if that's working for you guys based off of strengths and weaknesses and climate and temperature and training and all the stuff that you're saying, absolutely. So, and then improving from there, or continuing to refine down what it is that you have.
I think there's a direct correlation between innovation and really growth of business. Would you agree, Evan? Because essentially what you're doing every day is you're innovating new like procedures and processes to grow your company in an optimized manner. Whereas like some people sit back and they'll just chug through doing something that's not very efficient, where you sit back and try to innovate and formulate a better plan to grow and scale, and then obviously be more profitable, hire more people, and just be better across the board.
Yeah, it's funny because, Jeff and I, we've been working together for so many years. He's one of the guys who will actually turn on a problem for a year, 2 years. He'll just like kick it around and put time in the saddle on it, versus like, I'm more the guy that's like, yeah, this is good enough. Let's do it. Like let's execute on this. Whereas like Jeff will sit on something, I've seen him work on problems and turn on them for years. And it's funny, I was going to tell that story. Like, we used to work together in Afghanistan for a short time. We used to run out to the range in the mornings, and we were doing these like practical exercise, basically workouts. So we'd put our kit on, we'd go throw some frags, and then we'd go to the range, and we'd shoot like off our left side, off our right side. We'd shoot iron sights, we'd shoot electronic sights, we'd shoot the M4, we'd shoot the AK. We'd shoot like multiple weapon systems from different positions at different ranges.
Intermixed with exercise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we were doing elevated heart rate drills, basically with, combat application down, and I should say as close as we could, tactical application, I should say, not combat application.
And it was funny. So that gym that we had out there, like I had my guys build a gym right next to the range, and it was like there was only 2 guys that would ever hang with me to go out and do a shoot workout, a shooting with a workout with the elevated heart rate, was Evan and Angel.
Yeah, Angel Mendez.
Air Force PJ.
Or not Mendez.
Santana. So,
Yeah.
hey, Angel, if you're out there, hey. But the only 2 guys, like the other guys that were out there, would come out maybe once. And when you first do it and you're elevated, I mean, that's like the big thing now, where everybody's like, yeah, of course you're working out and shooting. But elevated heart rate is very different style of shooting than the other kinds of shootings that are out there. And we were shooting all the way out to 900 meters.
Yeah.
You're not hitting anything, but you can see how far off you are based off the geometry of where you're aiming and stuff. But at that time, like, they'd come out for maybe once and they couldn't hit anything to begin with, and they'd go back, and it's like keeping the gym separated from the other. But you'd learn a tremendous amount about shooting. I mean, it was fantastic.
Or
for
how
the
bad a
information.
shape you're in,
Or how bad a shape.
That's what Ranger Battalion started doing, is we'd do stress shoots where, run a mile out full kit, and then you have to be doing dummy drags, engage targets anywhere from 15 to 300 meters, and you start to realize like how much of an impact that has. And it's silly that people don't train that way, because unless you're landing on the X, well, your heart rate's going to be elevated. But like if you're doing an offset infill and you're walking all that, by the time you get to target and by the time you get into a firefight, your ass is going to be smoked. It's not like you're going to be on the range super light, like,
Yeah, when you're sitting there breathing like a breeding elephant, and trying to hold that front side.
Exactly. Like, fuck my life.
There's no like half breath out, hold it, squeeze.
When you learn a lot about marksmanship in that manner, because it's acceptable sight picture. Everybody tries to find the perfect sight picture. Like, it's acceptable. If I'm breathing up and down and I think my front sight post is there, I'm going to throw that round, man. Because for better or for worse.
But and actually, kind of one of the things that I was thinking about, I was reading Alan W. Eckert's book, so kind of reversal, but reading his book, and the frontiersmen, so it's like 1700s, and the frontiersmen would have these games where they would, they had muskets, obviously, flintlocks at the rendezvous, and so these guys would take off and they would be running and jumping and reloading muzzle loaders and shooting targets and throwing tomahawks, all of it on the run. And so they were trying to keep time on these guys.
It's a Merrill Marauder shit, dude.
That's straight up.
Yeah.
But if you think about that, it's like, man, that's, there was, how do you hit a target? So these guys, like wild animals, Indians, other settlers that were trying to kill them, it's like, okay, now we're talking, you've got to hit your target, because the reloading process was arduous. So that's when I was like, okay, this is a different thing based off of.
And I grew up doing that. So we used to go to black powder rendezvous still. Like I grew up from basically 6 to 12 doing these things in the summer. So I'd go out with my grandpa every year into the mountains in northern Idaho. Not like we'd live off the land, but we'd cruise around in his RV, going to rendezvous after rendezvous after rendezvous. He was the director of the Idaho chapter of black powder rendezvous. So we would do that. It's called a trail walk. And so what they would do, the mountain men would go out and they'd set up different stations as you were like walking through the woods. And there were scenarios. It was a scenario-driven training.
Scenario-based training.
Exactly. But instead of, you getting into a gunfight, it was like a log that was simulated a bear. And so you would be shooting like a really tight precision shot with your rifle at a distance, then a medium distance, and then you'd throw your tomahawk at a much shorter distance.
That's
and
awesome.
Then you'd be judged based on your time and accuracy. And I grew up doing these things. So for me, I was like, when I went to basic training, it was so funny.
Please tell me you shot expert in basic training.
I did, yeah. It was
okay,
fucking
good.
ridiculous.
Sweet.
And I had 39 rounds, and I had a malfunction, and I like pulled the last round out of my pocket, and the dude's like, holy fuck, where did you learn how to shoot? And I was like, I've been shooting muzzleloader since I was like 6 years old, so this is fucking nothing to me, actually. This is stupid. And but I loved it. So like even the best ranger competition, even though I was never ranger qualified, so I couldn't go, I was like, man, I want to do this fucking comp because it's fucking cool. It's so much fun, and it allows us to be like kids again, I would imagine, without like the endurance event that just feels like it's a
shit show.
Like grabbing your nuts, ripping them off, and shoving them back up in your ass. But going back to that, so we used to like go out to the range and do these exercises, nobody would do these things, right? Like nobody. People looked at us.
Well, because you got to check
we
your
were
ego
fucking
at the door.
crazy, man. Yeah, because you're gonna miss.
You're gonna
that's the
miss.
thing.
You're gonna miss.
I think that there's obviously with like social media specifically cultural influences that like don't allow you to be bad at things, anything, right? Everybody wants that fucking clearing that pie plate perfectly in social media, whereas like it's okay to be shitty at things because that's how you learn. Like,
well, I mean, that's I think that's the biggest misservice
things.
anybody's ever done in training is like guys will go out and train and then they give each other a high five and they're like, yeah, we're badasses. And it's like, no, the point of training is to identify your weaknesses
and
so you
build
can get
on
better.
them. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. It's not to identify your strengths and build on those and forget everything else.
Exactly.
That's the point of training. Just ask Panteo Productions. They've got plenty of those dudes. Right. Yeah.
Over here.
Sorry.
All right.
Jab in there.
That is.
How many minutes we got on
We're
this,
at
Jay?
45 right
Whoa,
now.
we had
Dude,
a
we'll
long
just
one.
cut this into 2 parts. Let's keep going for another 10 minutes and let's just
Well,
fucking
we
cut it
can
into
keep it
part
as
1 and
one.
2 because I really want to get into. Now that we've talked about innovation, we've talked about invention, we can cut it 1 and 2. Let's talk about why patent your shit, Jeff.
Oh, well, I've got a story about that.
Yeah.
Why patent your stuff? Well, the 50 cal mount is
It's a great example.
great example that would like straight up, taking a product and refining it and making it your own is that IP theft? You could probably argue that both ways. It depends. I guess you go back to the legal stuff with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. But copying a product exactly,
That's theft.
that's that. It's like, hey, come on. People change the color.
People
or
are
something.
savage with that stuff.
They
and you
are.
have,
Super
and you have to be a
savage.
tactician to really make sure to protect your IP. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let's just copy. Hey,
I'm sorry.
stay free. Stay free.
So here's a great story, and this was a great lesson in learning stuff. So, I'd lost the M2 mount because I got copied by some other people, and it was kind of okay. And if you're a true inventor, when stuff like that happens, you go, "That's great. That's all they've got." I had another one where the Molly seat back covers, that for Humvees and stuff. Well, they didn't exist, and I went to a guy. Me and Eric actually went to a guy. I went to Eric.
Eric
and I said,
Lawrence, a former owner of Blackheart International or BHI.
and now Vigilant Security out in West Virginia. And so we went to a guy and we said, hey, this is the concept. We want Molly on this seat back for Humvees so you can hang your own pouches and stuff like that.
Which seems like such a normal thing today. When you get in the thing, you have extra mags.
Super normal. Did not exist.
Kit. Yeah.
We were leading the pack on that. Well, about 4 months later, we're after this guy. It's like, hey, where's our prototype? We need our sample. Get us our prototype. Oh yeah, I'm working on it. About 4 months later, Eric sends me this article where this guy invented a new seat back cover. It was the guy that was supposed to be building our
stole
prototype.
your blueprint.
So straight up.
Who is that?
So that was I can't even remember his name now because it's been so long. It's like literally it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so next idea. So but the biggie was this. So we actually spent a lot of time and money on this one. So myself and another guy, Rich Mason, who runs
Darcy. Direct Action Resource Center.
Which is a phenomenal place, so kudos out to those guys. So we invented a drop-in bolt for an AK so you could shoot simunitions.
Right.
And at this time, Simunitions had spent like $2 million trying to develop the same thing. And Rich got hold of the CEO and their head engineer, and they both flew down and met with us. Now, I was smarter at this point because I talked to my sister, who's an attorney, and she said, make sure anything that you give these guys is marked confidential. Confidential, 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 confidential. So everything's marked confidential. We've got the stuff. We take it out. We shoot it. It works because it's a drop-in bolt for the AK. Meanwhile, the thing that they had was garbage. And so their head engineer could not believe that Rich and I had come up with this thing. I was like, no, we did. So anyways, they go home. We never hear back from them, and we're like, hey, are you guys interested? We're looking at it. So about 12 months later, Rich sends me a note and he's like, hey, go to Simunitions and look on their site. So I go to Simunitions and they've got an AK kit that they're offering, but they don't show the parts. But they do show the FNC parts, which is another rifle that has a very similar operating system, and it is our product.
Oh no!
It is a straight, and it's like, woohoo! We're going after Simunitions. We're going to go after them for IP theft. So we get a patent attorney, or we get an IP attorney, and we go, hey, and he's like, well, you guys didn't have a patent. And it was like, yeah, but everything was marked confidential. And he goes, yeah, well, Simunitions is owned by General Dynamic, and they have like a huge building full of lawyers that do nothing more than outspend guys like you. And he's like, I'll fight it, but you're going to get outspent.
Yeah, they're just going to bleed you until you say it's not worth the fight anymore.
So, point being is, if you have a good idea and you believe in it, get a patent.
Yep.
Because even if it's patent pending, or you have that patent process,
no one else can file, right?
Nobody else can file. And there's actually strategies. I lucked into my same sister that helped me with that, referred me to a patent office, Workman Nidegger, who are phenomenal. IP. We use them for all of our IP
we
stuff
use them
now.
too.
Yeah, Workman Nidegger is in Salt Lake City, Utah. That's who we use. I mean, that's a large firm, so it's fun. I really hope that spread the word, fellas. Like, if guys want to steal our designs, they're gonna have to deal with Workman Nidegger.
And now
Yeah,
we just
Workman
now we just
Nidegger is the
kick it
best
straight over there.
west of the Mississippi, correct?
Yeah, you could argue that. Yeah, they're phenomenal.
I mean, there's a difference between inspiration and theft that I believe in, because you see certain forms of content and other things that
Right.
were obviously inspired by something you do, and I think that's fucking awesome. I love that because it inspires the community to succeed in their own right. But when there's blatant plagiarism and theft, that's when lawyers have
And
to
when
get
your
involved.
entire
I guess-
business model is just fucking ripped up and rerouted.
And I think it's also important to understand too is oftentimes there'll be parallel ideas that are going down the same track. So for example, when I was developing the rat tourniquet, and actually I have two separate patents for two very different tourniquets, I just haven't released one of them, but the rat tourniquet, one of my early versions, it was like version number, 12 or something, was, I went through 26 different versions for that thing. But the early version was actually a wide inner tube, which is it was the SWAT tourniquet. Those guys did not steal my idea. They came up with it at the same time, or about the same time that I did. I ended up not continuing to develop my idea with the wide inner tube portion, which is like the SWAT tourniquet, because it didn't fulfill what I thought needed to be done. And then a little while later, the SWAT tourniquet came out. Few years later, SWAT tourniquet came out, and I was like, oh, that's cool. That was actually one of my. These guys did not steal my idea,
Right?
Because that idea never left my shop,
Right.
And so there would have been no way for anybody to have
Just
ever.
because you have a good idea doesn't mean someone else hasn't had it too.
Exactly.
It's a matter of execution at that point.
It's a matter of execution at that point, absolutely. But when you've executed the idea and you have an actual prototype,
Right.
that you are then going to somebody to continue to continue to developing that or turning it into an actual product like a seat cover or a drop-in AK. If you do not have that IP protection in place, then you are literally throwing the dice. You are literally throwing the dice, and you will probably lose. And so, I mean, that's
Well,
a
large
tough one.
corporations, whether it's tourniquets or whatever, they have people out there that just follow to see what up and coming ideas are, and then they'll action on their legal team to see if it's patented, trademarked,
Absolutely.
and if it's not, guess who's coming out with it because they have more money right down the road. It happens plenty of times.
And again, and I think too, you've got to visit on the inspiration thing is taking a non-patented idea or taking an idea that, and then developing that into something else. Is that theft, and should you give people credit and stuff? I mean, you could argue that back and forth. Nobody really knows, and that's why the patent laws actually just a few years ago changed, where it used to be first to idea, and that was such a quagmire mess of trying to figure out who came up with an idea first. So actually the law now is first to file.
First to file,
So
yep.
if you're the first guy to file, so that's why you want to keep your ideas private,
non-public,
and then you file, and then that gives you the protection. It starts the protection from the day that you start filing. Now, people often ask me, how long does it take to get a patent? And it's like, that's where I go, you're dealing with the federal government, so it depends. So the horror story that I can throw in there is because a lot of times very complicated patents can take longer because there's more research that has to be done by the patent examiner. More simple designs can be very fast. Well, you take my rat tourniquet, for example. It is the outlier as far as horror stories. So typically a patent will cost you about $8,000 to $10,000 depending on the complexity of the item. So if you're a cup is pretty simple. If you come up with a new way for a cup or something, and we're not talking designs, we're talking utility patents, and we'll talk a little bit of the difference here in a little bit. But a utility patent, which I believe is stronger, it's open up to interpretation. Utility patents take a little bit longer and they're a little bit more expensive, but they give you a broader scope of protection. So if you take my rat tourniquet, and you can get a utility patent in about 3 years. Because the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, they're unbelievably overworked, and when the federal government starts slashing spending, guess who loses their funding first? The Patent and Trademark Office, and that's something that a lot of people don't put out there. But it's good for big business because it keeps the little innovator out, because now you have these patent examiners that are overworked. So anyways, my rat tourniquet, very simple design. Any of you guys that know about it, it's very, very, very simple design. It took me 6 years and $40,000 to patent that thing.
Gosh,
because
damn.
and that's why that's an outlier, and I actually have 2 patents on it. It's an outlier horror story, but I tell people it's like it can happen. Most of my other stuff, like my other tourniquet, I mean, that was patented in 2 years. It was like 2 years, and it cost me like $6,000 or something. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of no rhyme or reason where you just fall under the scope of stuff. However, if the rat was the one that started taking off for me, and really people gravitated to it, and so that's where it's like, well, geez, I'm here, and that's not all at once for the fees, and that's not the legal team bleeding you dry. It's the Patent and Trademark Office, because they'll kick it back, and then you have to pay the legal team to write a rebuttal, and then the Patent and Trademark Office will kick it back, and then you have to pay the legal team to write a rebuttal. And every time you're paying the legal team, it's depending on who you've got. If you have a really good legal team, they're expensive, and so if you have less, then you can get away a little. And you can do patents by yourself too, right? But it's just it's tough, and it's time consuming. So. But it should give you a little bit of an idea versus and there's several different patent types you can get. The main ones that we deal with are utility and then the design patents.
Well, and there's something about the rapid application tourniquet system, which is the RATs, because there is this controversy kind of out there, I think, which would be kind of interesting just to spend a couple minutes on. It's funny because a lot of guys are like, you got to have one or the other, you got to have one or the other. You got to have a cat or a rat or fucking a ding dong or fring frang, and I'm a fring frang guy. It's like a Dr. Seuss story. Fucking looking at some of this bullshit
with no rhymes,
and it's like, man, I just was talking to a guy on Facebook a couple days ago, where he was just mud sucking the living shit out of the tourniquet, the rapid application tourniquet, and I was like, hey, dude, so try putting the cat on a small frame person or a dog, and then get back to me and tell me how that's working out for you. And we don't say, Jeff is the inventor of the rapid application tourniquet system. He's a guy that fucking went through years of work on it. He's not a one or the other guy. He's like, yeah, the cat, sure, man, you can use it, but mine has application here, here, and here. And so when the guy was saying, well, one's more of a general use. And I was like, absolutely not. The rat is actually more of a general use because it can carry a wider variety of casualties or patients, and you can treat them. And it's also more low vis. So if you're working and doing low vis work and you want a lightweight option, it's just a tool in the kit bag. And that's what I tell people. I'm like,
it's just an option.
Just an option, man. Like if somebody's going to go, if you don't have a knife on you and somebody hands you a Leatherman, are you going to throw it back at them?
Exactly.
Say,
that's
you.
why I don't.
I'm a knife guy.
That tourniquet argument from all these fucking weirdos.
They're weirdos.
They're stupid. You're wasting your time. What you're doing is you think you're fun or cool because you talk to one expert, and now you're an expert too.
It exists everywhere. I mean, look at the firearms industry. The fact that I carry a Glock, people are like, you fucking idiot. And I'm like, that's great. I've shot probably fucking 200,000 rounds through them, and I love them. So that's my choice as a fucking professional. That's it.
Right.
My choice.
And it's interesting too. Like, there's a Stop the Bleed campaign that's out there, and they actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in supporting this?" And I was like, "Absolutely." I mean, we're big supporters of law enforcement and military, and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And they're like, "Hey, we have to tell you, North American Rescue," and North American Rescue owns the CAT tourniquet. They're like, "Hey, they're one of the sponsors," and I was like, totally not an issue to me. What's important to me is that people understand that all the urban myths about tourniquets are just that.
Urban
They're
myths.
Like the whole thing, you're going to lose the limb and all this.
Tissue
It's the
damage.
biggest bunch of garbage that was ever. It's like,
And we
no,
work closely
save
with
life.
North American Rescue in the back through our movie and stuff, and they've been phenomenal
NAR
in that
was the
sense.
sponsor
Yeah,
to the
so,
movie.
And that's where it's just like, hey, all I want is there's seldom one answer to one question. You know, there's multiple answers.
Multiple ways to skin a cat.
And at the bottom line is, hey, let's save lives. Let's make sure that let's make sure that we can stop the bleed. As a matter of fact, Rats just had 2 saves here last week. A guy went crazy on his sister and his dad here locally with a knife. Arterial bleeds, responding police officers, they used Rats tourniquets and got to the hospital, and the surgeons were like, hey, if you hadn't used tourniquets, he would have died. They didn't say if you hadn't used Rats tourniquets. It was like if you hadn't used tourniquets. And it's like, hey guys, it is a life-saving piece of equipment. And the whole thing about use your belt, I just did a video on using your belt. And so the whole thing about using your belt,
doesn't work.
Stick that thing on your leg and tell me how well that thing works. Because the Boy Scout thing, can you do that in a pinch? Yes. Can you just throw it on there and expect
it's going to slow an
work?
arterial bleed, but it's
It'll
not going to
slow
stop
down,
it.
But it's not going to stop it, and it is way harder to get the belt to work than you think. And if you're carrying a gun belt that's got the risers or the stiffeners in there, guess what? It flat out won't work. And so that's where it's like, hey, you guys, carry the equipment that you need.
I like it.
Awesome.
Well, I think that sums it up, man. This is just our first 2 episodes with Jeff Kirkham from Ready Man. You can find Ready Man at Facebook, so just go to Facebook / Ready Man, I think, right?
Yep,
Ready Man team.
You'll find us on there.
Yeah, you'll be able to check them out on Funker 530. Make sure that you're downloading and liking everything on Facebook on Blackhearted's podcast. Stay tuned. We'll start pumping these episodes out live every week from the BlackRifle Coffee. Yeah, sound studio. So thanks a lot for tuning in. Thanks a lot for Jeff Kirkham.
Guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
guys.
Zach, back there in the background. Catch you next week, guys.
Black Rifle Coffee Company, along with Arson Wave, would like to thank you for tuning in to Blackhearted. Have a great fucking day.